Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Chizito. On Spectrum tonight, we'll review the week. Some of the issues we'll be looking at. The Vision 2040. Yesterday, President Museveni launched this vision that seeks to transform Uganda from a gross domestic product per capita of $560 to $9,500 in just about 30 years. We'll talk about that. The NRM expels 4 MPs. Will they remain in Parliament? The public eagerly awaits a verdict from the Speaker's office on what will happen. The interpretation of Article 83G is in contention. We'll also talk about Kenyan affairs. Yesterday, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta announced his government slashing cabinet portfolios from 44 to 18. Do we have lessons in that place, and what kind of cabinet and government are they going to have? In the end, our guests tonight, Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, twice Ugandan representative of the East African Parliament from the NRM party. You're most welcome, Honorable Lydia Wanyoto.
Thank you. Good evening, listeners and viewers. Baris are joined.
Viewers, because we're also on the internet. Off YouTube, you can get a video of Spectrum. We're also joined by Mr. Azman Basalira, President of the Justice Forum Party, also known as JEM. You're most welcome, Honorable Basalira.
Thank you very much, and good evening, all our listeners and viewers.
We're also joined by Dr.
Eating yellow sweets from me.
I have refused to eat them.
We're also joined by Mr. Charles Bemushana, former head of political intelligence at State House, also a honorable member.
The Almighty God is great, and there is no power above him.
We're also joined by Dr. Arthur Bainomish, head of the Peace and Security Program at Accord, that's a think tank and NGO, and lecturer at Makerere University. You're most welcome, Dr. Arthur.
Thank you, Edmund, and good evening, viewers and listeners.
Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, how do you perceive the Vision 2040?
I think any organized country should have a blueprint of where you want your country to go, so that you have a track and the tracking of what you want to do. It does not matter whether you achieve it or not, but what's important is that at least you have something written on paper that you will be accountable to people to, and you are able to analyze and also account how far you have gone, and be able to let out challenges and give reasons periodically why you're not being able to do it. Now, the Vision 2040, in my humble opinion, has the fundamental pillars of where we want to go, not only as government of Uganda now, but it is really what every Ugandan aspires to have in our 21st century. We would like to see that everybody has food on the table, there is shelter, we are taking our children to school, and that we live part of the modern world, because really Uganda is part of the global community right now. So when you look at the different chapters of the document was launched yesterday, there are issues of infrastructure, both soft and hard infrastructure. The soft infrastructure, we are part of the global community that now talking about ICT, but also the hard infrastructure in terms of communication, road infrastructure, water infrastructure, transport, and making the cost of doing business affordable, so that we are able to balance our GDP and also be able to, from economies of scale that come from minimizing costs of doing business, and then maximizing opportunities that come with efficiency and effectiveness. So I would like to call upon all Ugandans that this is the vision that we should share and aspire, have aspirations for. And let's look, it's like an elephant, Edmund. I mean, somebody may look at it from the ears, someone from the legs in the trap, but at the end of the day, we must have something that we all look to, whether we want to, and cause a sitting government to account, and for prosperity. So we should plan for the future. And I'm happy that we've been able to write something that goes beyond elective years. I mean, we are talking about 2040, when our elective years really is 2016, and that's the way we should be running our government and business, and ensure that we think beyond electoral periods and when we're in the office, because this is about Uganda. We'll get off the scene, but Uganda will stay, and we need to plan for the children and for those that will come after us.
Does it fit the bill in your view?
Does it fit
the bill?
Definitely, given the times, yes, it fits the bill. For those that have had the hands-on, it fits the bill, and I think I also believe that it is open for improvement, because you can't imagine how much the world is changing. There is so much that is going on that triggers so many emergent changes. I mean, we may think that the best thing that we've had is 2040, but then 2-3 weeks from now, there will be some emerging issues that will change the scope of world thinking and dynamics. And therefore, this is not a book that we should do, a document that we should keep and say it cannot change. It should be as dynamic as the changing times of the world now, so that we are able to cope with the challenges that come with the huge emerging issues, but also be able to deliver something and lay a foundation for the future of our country.
Dr. what's your own view of this?
Thank you very much, Edmund. First, I wish to take this opportunity to congratulate
you are looking at me,
the government for dreaming. I mean, for inspiring dreaming. And I'm captivated by what is proposed, the high-tech ICT city. I don't know where they want to put it. Building of 5 regional cities, science and technology parks in each regional city, oil refinery, and what have you. I think it is imperative that any country should have a dream. And I think what has propelled America to prosperity is having that American dream. But I think the challenge that I have, having said that this is very good, it is good to dream. I have few issues with this dream. The Vision 2040. One, I think Vision 2040, in my view, it was not formulated through a popular participation. They didn't use a bottom-up approach that would have actually involved the participation of all citizens. Because you see, without Ugandans conceiving this dream and working together to achieve that desired common future, I think then it remains a dream and aspiration. But secondly, I think one also must ask what went wrong, what happened to the 2025 vision, what about the draft 2035 vision, what has happened, what did we achieve? Because I think this dream should underscore the achievements and then be building on those dreams. But I think it's as if it's a new thing. What did we achieve? I think if we are not careful, it may become one of those white elephants. But secondly, I think I think we must agree that yes, it is premised on the oil and gas revenue that is coming in the country. My fear is that there are certain fundamentals we must first get correct. We must look at the levels of corruption, which is not a new thing, we all know. So the vision actually must seriously tell us how it's going to tackle that corruption, massive corruption of public resources. Because we may get, yes, this vision, it may create a few or a handful of very, very rich people. If you calculate the GDP, it may give you 9,500 per capita, but is in the hands of very few. And you have massive poor people who only see those ones, and it could lead to other issues. Then the other thing, of course, it doesn't talk about inclusive growth. It doesn't talk about inclusive growth, and even now, of course, the growth is so skewed. If you look at northern Uganda in terms of the distribution of wealth, I think about 56% of the people in northern Uganda below poverty line. So we must, the plan must also tell us how it's going to distribute poverty, rather wealth, how it's going to lift people from poverty to that level. But also, I think the plan doesn't focus on the regional perspectives. It doesn't.
What do you mean regional perspective?
Uganda, it is talking about.
It promises you cities, regional cities.
It's talking about building an independent, integrated, and self-sustaining economy. But my problem is that that means that Uganda is the vision looks at Uganda as an entity, but we we are fast-tracking regional integration. And I think by 2020...
Or a region beyond
I think the region should now be looking at the East African region rather than Ugandan nation. So the fact that they have lost sight of that one, I think then I agree with my sister Lydia, who says that it's not beyond revision. I think I would recommend that that this vision is revisited urgently to bring on board every citizen, but secondly to bring in the regional dimension so that we bring on board other countries and we grow together without looking at those. Then I think the vision will remain an aspiration.
Honorable Charles Romshana.
But you have to position Uganda.
First and foremost, look at the mindset of the population. If you got this population and you took it to Germany, now Germany will be the dirtiest place on earth. And if you brought Germans here, Kampala will be too clean. Yes. So that's the mindset of the population. Now look at the generation you are preparing. If you go and check senior 6 students and you check university students, instead of going to the library, they go to watch movies. They go to watch movies. They are not even movies.
Yes, go on.
Nigeria, those kind of whatever. You see, that you are a lawyer and the president of a political party because you didn't waste time in this kind of thing. But the generation that is coming now is
the president was trying to grab here. Let's go on.
So before you even think of getting money, because the myopism of this program is that they have looked at money as the primer of growth. They have not looked at other aspects, and one of them is, as I told you, the mindset. During the time of Obote, during the time of Amin, people looked at cultivation, they looked at production, they looked at hard work, and they inculcated these values in their children. Now for us, it is about luxury, it's about touring, it's about relaxation, it's about theater, etc. So we need to work on the mindset now. The second thing, there is no you invest in infrastructure. There is, but you teach your kid now to eat bread on breakfast so that tomorrow that kid will provide breakfast to the family and that will increase generation. But if every one of us is going to go singing, who is going to pay for that singing? Who is going to? Now, fiber optics, for instance, you look at the quality of fiber optics. A simple thing to do with internet. Now, if you go anywhere now in Kampala, internet is very slow because we are not prepared for this kind of investments, given the massive corruption that we have. So it's good to dream, but what is the quality of a dream, of the dream of a person who has taken waraji? What would be the quality of that dream? You will be dreaming while it is total, and these fellows who are taking these dreams are people who have really taken waraji.
Let's get to
Order.
The people gone.
Because if you see a minister stealing a BlackBerry, a minister, they scrambling for BlackBerry when they are just Toyota changes the Land Cruiser just rates. Government of Uganda must spend billions because it has changed the rates, and you find ministers scrambling. That kind of mindset, what can they dream? They are tantamount to my. Now the NADS, this NADS program was supposed to revolutionize agriculture, modernize agriculture, but government stops it. For what? To promote border borders. Well, if you can have growth, border borders stop NADS to that they would rather divert money for border borders. You have a capital city and you are thinking of building another capital city, and your transport system is based on border borders. That mindset alone really shows you that there is a huge disconnect. And the population, where Western comes from, up to now they don't have the know-how to dig jiggers, to remove jiggers from their feet. Just that simple know-how. Forget about preventing the jiggers by bathing and washing, which capacity they even don't have, but they know how to remove jiggers.
Disaster response mechanism.
They don't have that, and that's why you say you want to put cities. They couldn't manage the trading centers and the municipalities of they left them. Now I want to give them cities. You can really see that the dreamers have taken a lot of courage. But what I agree, the vision for cities is based on the land they have stolen. So you will find somebody having a city in his name because he went there in advance.
boundaries.
He went there in advance, stole land, because even in industrial park here at Naman, you can dig the stories how they stole land in advance, and it has even curtailed
It is fair to take off.
and that is full evidence that they have dreamt having taken what that they are dreaming is where. So, in a nutshell, Uganda has no capacity now to absorb 200 billion. We don't have that capacity. Why? Anyone now who gets money.
2040.
Yeah, but I mean, 2040 begins from somewhere. The mindset now.
Progressive.
The mindset, even if you ask the Honorable DDR, even if you ask us, because I know Asa is building, the first thing Asa thinks about is the wall fence. Now you go in Kampala and find out how much money has been spent on wall fences for security. The amount of money we have spent in wall fences alone could be half of the buildings we have in Kampala in terms of value. Why? Because the police cannot provide security. Yeah, so there is for fear of insecurity, we spend a lot of money in constructing walls. But when you go into organized places, they don't have wall fences. So that shows that when we get these 200 billions, our priorities are going to be different. They are not going to be for small scale industry like the way China is doing. They are going to be, they are not going to, it's going to be for consumption. And when you look at these flyovers, just for purposes of convenience, flowers, you've seen how much money just from has put in this small thing down here near.
They say it is 70 billion.
Well, they have even launched
100 million shillings.
Yes.
Where
Where they have launched the vision.
Fountain and some.
Boss, where they have launched the vision. You cannot have a capital city without a court. To have a court, you must have prisons. And when you have a capital city that has got industries, people will mentally break down. You need to have a mental hospital like they all had with Butabika. But the what is of that time? Come again? Now they have stolen all the land. They've stolen the land and built their houses, huts, to relax, children to go there and play football. If the land falls there, because how can you have a city that doesn't have prisoners? So why are you going to be putting people who will be breaking the law? So they put their factories. How can you have a city that has no emergency landing like airport for running planes in case of emergencies? Look that we have when General Karakiwa has built there an office in an airstrip. The airstrip, they have put their gloves. Now they have even put their pavilion where to watch when the president and his group are having their birthdays or what do we call this anniversary? When they were born in 2000 and something. And then the pavilion, how do we wave? I want them to, when I'm waving, they see me properly. But this is an airstrip where you're supposed to be running planes in case of emergencies. Now, in case of an emergency, where do you put people? We don't have space where you can put group of people without courage. We don't have. There is no, this Kampala is a Peter city. People have, they dig holes in their compounds where to keep their fecal material. So they have fecal material stored all around us. So how can that kind of people who have got that kind of thinking, and you think that they are going to have a vision of spending, of consuming 200 billion. So if the whole plan is to steal that oil money, because the dreaming is based on what?
Let's look at some of the figures.
What is that vision?
Right, let's look at some of the figures. Uganda's GDP right. Okay, let's get. Uganda's GDP right now is $17 billion. We expect from current figures that we have $70 billion from oil. Where is the 200 going to come from?
No, but
in 30 years?
But Ebdimond, you have cheated us. What then the stars want Uganda to do? Not
I think it's not just thinking. Let's take the benefit. Asman, talk to us about that. Is there a disconnect there? $17 billion economy. You're talking about $200 billion in 30 years. Is it realistic or is it a pipe dream?
Well, I think this whole debate of oil is giving us a lot of expectation. And we can only hope. I know that this vision is progressing, and I know that most of these monies we are talking about are going to be realized with time. So
let's be realistic. $70 billion economy. You expect $70 billion from oil in 20 years?
Yes, and I'm saying that it is all going to be progressive. Okay, the expectation we are getting. I mean, the oil is bringing a lot of expectation, and that's why when you look at this vision, it is anchored on the expectation of the oil resource. Okay, so I think as a country we are looking at oil as a panacea to all our problems,
a cure all,
as our challenges. And yet, as Arthur mentioned, we don't seem to have safeguards. Nobody seems to provide the cushions against, for example, graft. Okay, because there is no way you are going to tell us that the oil will come, the money will not be stolen. Those cushions are not provided for. But I think there are two issues on a light note. One, I am happy personally that for the first time, people in this government are talking about something that is going to outlive their lives. No. When you talk about 2040, even if the beginning point is now,
That is 27 years from now.
40, no, I am saying if the beginning point is now, okay?
You have 27.
Most likely, these guys, if they will be around, they will be relevant, okay? But most likely they will not be around. So for the first time, I think these guys in leadership are beginning to think about the Uganda where they will not be. It's not like before where somebody said, let the forest go, after all, I will not be there. At least on a light note. Number two, I also want to agree that as a country, we really need to have a path. If we are coming up with a vision, in my view, it should be a laudable issue. We need to have a direction, a destiny. Now, we can only talk about how we arrive at that destiny and what should constitute that destiny. So I think those two elements are positive. But let me mention four things briefly. Number one, in my view, this vision, and I don't know why Dr. Museveni is real obsessed with the word vision.
Dr. Yoweri Museveni.
Yes, Dr. Yoweri Museveni. I don't know why he's always obsessed with the word vision. We have had several visions. One time he said he's the only visionary. Okay, he's next to God. Now he's talking about Vision 2040. I don't know why he's obsessed with this. But I think a vision of a country should be anchored on certain aspects.
What else?
Number one, quality education. I don't see how this vision has addressed the issue of transforming the education system of this country. I told you the other day I was in Malaysia. I was amazed at the level of transformation, and each time I was asking these guys, who is putting up these roads? They are not engineers with university degrees. They are people who have gone through vocational.
Let's take a break right now. We'll start it off right. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. We're reviewing the tonight to stay with us.
So I'm chilling at home with my crew. The boys are waiting to watch the game on the telly, but the chicks want to go to the beach. So how do we play it? A glance across the room. Eye contact is made. A plan is hatched. Pete will get some sand. Lots of it. Jeff will take care of the deco, Tim the entertainment, and I the clubs. And so we bring the beach to our apartment. If we can't go to the beach, we bring the beach to us. It's just how we do.
It's not about where you're at. It's the difference you bring. Get a fresh take on things. Club is brewed longer for easier drinking. Brewed slower for great taste. Club, tastefully different. Not for sale to persons under the age of 18.
Excuse me, what is this 300 shillings on my bill for?
That is for the tinted candles, madam.
And this 100 shillings?
That is for the air conditioning.
And this 200 shillings?
For the blue walls, ma'am.
I can't believe this!
Why pay for what you don't use or ask for? That's why we at Standard Chartered are introducing the Easy Go account, the first current account of its kind that gives you complete control of your banking charges. For more details, visit a Standard Chartered branch or call 0414-340077.
Would you like to leave me a tip, please?
Welcome to the new world.
MTN, everywhere you go.
Legitimate whiskey is different. I am proud that we can now enjoy quality and taste. And style too. I have not felt so original with the liveliness I get each morning after I enjoy legitimate whiskey. Everything seems to be going my way. This is a worthy discovery. Legitimate whiskey is blended from carefully selected Scotch malt, giving it a golden amber appearance with a silky smooth and soothing taste for lasting satisfaction. Legitimate whiskey, a masterfully crafted blend, expertly blended, lighter and styled whiskey. Please enjoy responsibly.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Like this.
Welcome back on Spectrum. Tonight we're reviewing the week.
You need, it's good.
We've talked about the Vision 2040, NRM expelling foreign priests, Kenyan cabinet. We'll also talk about Henry Tumukonde being sentenced this week. Our guests, Honorable Lydia Onyeto, Trans-Uganda representative of the East African Parliament, Mr. Osman Basalira, President of the Justice Forum Party, Dr. Arthur Bainomjisha, Head of the Peace and Security Program at Accord, and lecturer at Makerere, Mr. Charles Lomshana, former Head of Political Intelligence at State House. Honorable Basaga, you spoke to us about Vision 2040. You were very, very excited about it.
I was talking about the anchors, and somebody was reminding me that there is an element on education.
Skilling.
Yes, skilling, whatever it is.
Yes.
And my concern is that that aspect is not a new phenomenon.
We have rebranded it.
Not very long ago, a law was passed on BTV. Okay? In this country.
Business, technical, and veterinary.
Yes, you can only ask as a country how far we have gone with the operationalization and implementation of what constitutes that law.
It became nice.
We have had polytechnics in this country. You can only ask what became of those polytechnics.
The universities have grown.
And so that's a very important aspect. Number two, the health of the population, that is going to be a sine qua non of this vision. What do you have in place in terms of exact strategy? Okay? Exact strategy. That must come out very clear. But above all, the governance. You can talk about vision until Jesus comes back. You are right. How is this vision going to be anchored in the absence of proper governance and democratic structures and credentials of the leadership? Not long ago, Uganda has been described as one of the countries that are very vulnerable to becoming failed states. Okay? How are we addressing, for example, the political and democratic paralysis in this country? President Dr. Museveni and Lydia's on one side, Basagas and the others on the other side, where the president wants to arrogate unto himself all the authority to think for the country, hence transforming himself into the only visionary. So the governance issue, and once the governance issue is not resolved, I'm telling you, this country will go the Somalia way, it will go the DRC way. So when you are talking about the Vision 2040, we also want to see how you are addressing the governance question. And when you look at in that vision, it makes an assumption that all is well. All is not well. But, so I think it's important for us to look at that aspect.
All right.
What about the legislative framework?
That's really Edmund.
The legislative framework for this vision, I think it would also be very important for it, for the vision, to be anchored in a proper legislative framework. But finally, Edmund, I don't want us to overlook the point Charles is raising about the mental orientation.
We might not be able to get
mental orientation and transformation.
All right. Let's talk about that.
The attitude of the people. Okay? You are in a country.
Let's not talk about that.
This document went through Parliament of Uganda.
So-called rebel
This
MPs.
document, Edmund, went through Parliament and was approved by Parliament of Uganda.
What do you think is going to happen? What do you tell us about the mind of the NRM as a party? Has it become intolerant, and what do you think is going to happen?
NRM has simply changed tack, because if you deviated from the correct line in the bush, you would have a kafun.
What's that?
A Kakafoni, they would hit you on the head like the way they hit pigs.
Oh, is it English or Nyakole? Is it English?
Kakafoni, you can check it. You can check from those people who are in the bush. Kakafoni. I don't know what they
Explain that, yeah. Go on, move on.
The Karai be protected.
Who's gone? Make your point.
Surely you can't come and say Kafun.
When a hoe is getting old, when it's wearing off that small piece that remains, now they turn it round and hit you behind the head.
Explain the meaning of the import of
yeah, if you don't toe the correct line,
what is happening?
Otherwise, you are seen to be a traitor.
Yes.
The only difference now.
I think Kataimba used to.
The only difference now is that because for a long time NRM had not expelled any member, they only amended the constitution. You remember that phrase, which the phase of the.
Let's see about the dynamics now.
Now, the problem now is that NRM tried to build legitimacy through democracy, but it set very high standards, and those high standards encroached on the powers of the presidency. So you have the speaker with some power here, you have claiming their power, and parliament trying to claim their power to challenge the executive. Now, initially NRM had the chairman, and the chairman was the speaker. The president, who was the chairman of the high command, was also the speaker. Now, when he left being the speaker, his vice, who was then Alhaji Moses Chigongo, became the speaker.
He never quite shared it for a long time.
But it was a delegated function to his vice.
Yes.
So the function of the speaker of parliament and the executive were fused. Now it is the CA that separates the speaker and parliament from the other organs, because now you are now trying to make institutions. But in the Constituent Assembly, we are interested in checking the powers of the president, and we gave a lot of power and security of tender to members of parliament. And this has become a threat. Because the new pillars of the ruling elite is corruption and the things that they preach against, and therefore a possibility of the uprising of the population. So how do you control them? The executive, the presidency takes over the management of parliament, and this is what has happened. You now have a president sitting with his team in the State House and sacking a member of parliament, but the target is different. The target is when Nebanda was killed. Because if you read
some things that lead you to the court martial. Let's talk about
that. I mean, there's a point I'm revolting. Otherwise, when you leave it, then when you leave it behind, you are not going up in the court. When you leave it in the middle, then it's a point to be misunderstood. Yeah, because if you look at this, let's talk about
we'll get back to that point later. Dr. Benongisha, do you think these legislators are going to leave parliament? The four men, parliament.
Yeah, now, thank you very much, Bwana Edmond. I think my comment really should be limited to this
discussion.
Yeah, but what I read from the expulsion of members of parliament, first of all, I see the pros and the cons of it. One, that the party is trying actually to steal discipline, because you see, as an emerging democracy, as a young democracy, there is always a temptation for people actually to be indisciplined because they have not been used to this kind of order. So I think what we see,
the kind of freedom that they have.
Yeah, the freedom also can be abused because people have not been exposed, and that happens to most countries that are emerging from domination, from oppression, or transiting from war to peace. That too much democracy can actually affect them. That you can experience too much corruption, too much violence sometimes, and that fighting because you don't have the culture of democracy. But as soon the democratic culture catches on, and people understand. So I think enforcing party discipline is part of the democratic culture. But on the other hand, because of the history of this country, the democratic growth, we have a precedent of in 1969, the purging of UPC, you know, this, and of course it comes when the party has when there is one party dominance in parliament and in the country, and because naturally human beings want other people to contend with. If they remain alone because of lack of existential threat, there is that internal contradiction. So we see the dominance of NRM them in the parliament, causing this kind of split, because people essentially they want to create some level of opposition within themselves. So that is why if we have a strengthened political position in this country, it would actually strengthen the NRM because of the existential threat, the risk of losing power to them. But also, I want also to say that we also see through this scenario the parliament trying to exert its independence. There's a struggle between the executive and the parliament over their status and roles in the governance of this country. The whole principle of separation of powers is being challenged, and I think this has been consistent. That we see the executive, of course, for a long time, the executive in this country has been powerful, but the ninth parliament has been trying to exert itself, and to some extent that we saw actually people crossing the party lines. You saw the opposition MPs now ganging with the NRM MPs that oppose the executive. I think that what should I call it? That crossing of party lines is an attempt of the independence, the parliament to exert its own independence, and I think it is also healthy. But I think through this also we could end up strengthening the opposition. I have argued here that unless we have a strong, credible and loyal opposition in this country, we cannot have a functioning democracy and improvement in service delivery for our people, because people relax. Corruption thrives because the ruling elite lacks an existential threat, so that they can work for the people to retain the political power.
As Ambassador, the Attorney General set up a team of lawyers and to advise him on this matter. What do you think?
No, but the Asman has no longer started discussing things. Surely, why you doing it?
He's an informed observer. He's a political.
No, well, let me
an important political player.
Let me talk about the non-NRM issues. Number one, discipline. I concur with Arthur. I head a political party. When there is indiscipline, I want to act tough. Okay? But we should differentiate between indiscipline and difference in opinion. If a member of my party, Jema, disagrees with me or expresses an opinion different from mine, I don't want to describe that as indiscipline, and I don't want to make that a reason for expelling him or her from my party. But the discipline must be maintained, because you see, there are a lot of double standards being exhibited. Let me not call them double standards. There are no standards at all. If it is about, for example, if it's about expulsion, the whole cabinet should have been expelled from the NRM.
What do you mean?
Look at the bill, the marriage and divorce bill. Yes. It originates from cabinet, and all cabinet members who are MPs go to the ground and oppose it. Now, what is that? That alone should have been a ground for expulsion of all these guys. Technically. So what we are doing, not even technical, legal and practical. So what we are seeing here is exhibiting no standards. I don't want to call them double standards. There are no standards at all. So we really need to emphasize the point that the discipline must be there, but that discipline must not be construed to mean gagging. You ask about the departure. I think the Attorney General is right to establish a team of lawyers for one simple reason. The president is going to be set. We live in a country because many people have quoted Article 83. Article 83 is very interesting. You can read it and interpret it depending on the law school you were and the time and what. But I will tell you, I think the Constitutional Court will do us a lot of good. It is talking about living. My own opinion is, if Parliament had wanted to make expulsion part of the reason for seizing, they would have. There is nothing which should have stopped them from making
the hazard is indicate.
Yes, I will
indicate the strategies and
in the constitutional interpretation, hazards are a relevant guide. So I hope when we come to that level, the hazards will be invoked. Finally, I think they will not leave Parliament, in my view.
Yes.
Because I had somebody quoting South African experience and getting in Mbeki. Okay? They forget one thing, that South Africa uses actually proportional representation. That is why exactly it's an issue of fronting the political party, and Jena has been at the forefront of advocating for proportional representation. So where there is no proportional representation, there is no way you can say an MP leaves parliament. What if we say that those who are not NRM but voted Sechikobo and Msedeko should come out and demonstrate? What is government or the NRM going to do? Because it is true that people who are not NRM voted these guys. What happens in our situation here is that a party only offers you a platform.
Let's move forward.
It has nothing to do with proportionality as we understand it and a proportional representation system.
Dr. Mukonde, advocating for, was acquitted yesterday of most of the charges, and he was sentenced to a reprimand. A severe reprimand. It's all 8 years of trial. What does that tell us about that justice? Was justice done eventually?
You first of all explain to us what severe means in terms of reprimand.
What's a reprimand in the first place? You call him and tell him never do this again. Wave a finger at him.
Yeah, you know, Tumukunde, Brigadier Tumukunde did not disobey. It was not about disobeying law for order. It was not about professional misconduct. It was about politics. That he was part of the, you know, remember he won elections during the CA. He's a soldier who came in having won, because I came with him, we come from the same district, 2 constituencies, Rumba and Rubago. And I remember the nature of the election that we had. So he came in his own right, having won a popular vote. And that's how he rose. And then he excelled in the, but after the Moya meeting, after the victory in the elections, it's a long story, we don't have enough time to discuss it. He takes on the political line and opposes with the historicals the amendment of the constitution to remove term limits. So it's an activity, it's action that is being taken on all the centers. Some were expelled, others were allowed Kubejako, you see, others have been threatened with jail, others have been put to prison like the Mukura. Now you can see what they are doing to Asaja Baraba. And Tumukunde is, but the difference with Tumukunde is how hard they are hitting him. I don't want to think that if it was Arthur, he would have gotten another kind of thing. I mean, the policy is containment. You can't expel him, you don't want him in the prison, but he must be contained and must remain in the military. Because if he gets out, he will be with Michamont. You know, they are like twins. Probably if he gets out, he will be with the BSJ. And the reason that we have built a culture of military people in politics, it's very difficult to stand with a military man, more especially like in the West. And I mean, that's why the BSJs and Montus are winning, are leading political parties. Because people are still in the other phobia of militarism, of generals, and this other thing of the Attorney General advising. How do you have one of Sam Kutesa when the team to advise on the fate of Setco?
Dr. Arthur Painomsha, they are sworn enemies of
he won't side, he won't be a fair judge against such.
But even the way the whole thing was set up, the complainant is the Supreme Court, because he was the chairperson of the SEC. The one who tried him at the disciplinary committee, that had Moses Tugongo, and Aman Babazi, who is also part of the complainant, sit in the SEC. Now the Speaker of Parliament, who is going to take a decision, is a member of the SEC. So which kind of justice? Even his wife sits in the SEC. Darling, what do we do to him now that we have him? He remove his feathers.
Not even the first lady sits there. Dr. Ababano, talk to us about Henry Tumukunde, Brigadier. Was that justice eventually done? After 8 years?
I think, of course, it was good for government to finally dispose of that case. I think for 8 years. Of course, there delayed justice also.
It was bordering justice denied.
It was bordering justice denied. I agree with the media. But I think what we learn from the case of Brigadier Tumukunde is the experience suffered by most countries that have come from the transition from war to peace and the recapture power for militarily, and then most of those people who participate, the revolutionary. You see, there is a research that has been established that a country that has so many revolutionary-minded people stands a lot of chances of instability, because all these are revolutionaries and they all want to be presidents, and it's no wonder that you get this kind of confusion. And I think what the president has helped is to actually contain.
I know you want
is to contain an army that is very politicized, and so normally they all want to go into politics, and I think seriously we need to say serious security sector reform, so that people can now transition from that the warrior tradition.
How do you transition?
The warrior tradition to now to political and democratic.
How do you do it? Brainwash what?
No,
or force them out?
Security sector reform.
How do you do
but
it?
Also allow people actually to transition on to civilian life, so that they can try and actually, if they are defeated even in elections, people become disciplined. So, but I think Uganda still suffers that one. Even the population, you find that most of the people in the countryside think that the president, the person who can manage this country, must have a military background. That's illusionary. That's really a problem.
Justice.
First of all, I would like to congratulate Brigadier Henry Tumukunde and his family. He's out. I think the severe reprimand is for the statutory books and those of us who understand, but at least he's at home and he was released. To the civilian community, we congratulate him because he's at home and he's free, he's a free man. And having said earlier that everybody was getting jittery, I mean, you can't have somebody in court for 8 years. It's very costly in terms of mental, but also in terms of the costs involved, and that borders justice denied. On the political arena, we have Uganda is part of the South African community, and it's not the only country that has come out of a military governance arrangement. Actually, I think the South African countries have the majority. Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi have had a military history. But I think Rwanda is a good example because they were able to transit, they were able to disband the military armed conflict group, and then they built a new army. So you stayed in the army by choice, but otherwise there was a transition. Clearly, with the time frames to start off Rwanda as a country and the defense forces, there's a clear line to that.
Well, I think it's the judgment and conviction, in my view, are quite laughable. Once the prosecution failed to bring evidence before court that those so-called harmful propaganda was spread on air, that should have really been the end of the case. So I find the conviction and the sentence, in my view, very laughable. But also to note that it should not be a cause of excitement. It has gone on his record that is a convict. Okay, it is on record. When you, by the way, for the record, there are 4 types of punishment. You can be fined. Very briefly, yes. You can be, imprisoned. You can go for community service. You can be cautioned. That's a reprimand. A caution is a form of punishment. Okay, and those of you who travel, if you go to apply for visa US, okay, and there is a question, have you ever been convicted? Don't say no because you were reprimanded. So I think it's a black spot on his record.
Honorable, just before we go, yesterday President Uhuru Kenyatta announced his government. Cabinet would be
rolled out a government structure of 18 ministries. It's been able to merge so many other dockets so that they have a lean but efficient ministries, which will be headed by political heads called the cabinet secretaries. Do
you have any lessons in that move? Are we living in different worlds?
Well, Kenya is coming from a reformed constitutional order. They have a new constitution of 2010. So they are showing the spirit of their new constitution, and they are driving a spirit of Jubilee era. So I think we have lessons learned from that. They want to do things differently, and that was their campaign agenda.
Dr. Arthur, before we go, what can we learn from Kenya? Was it the wise thing to have it?
I think Kenya has set a big milestone.
What kind of government do you think that we're going to
Kenya has set one year milestone. They have organized very peaceful elections. Even when they were challenged, they went to court, and I think that is a milestone. But secondly, I think they are setting also high standards for the region. A youthful youngest president, and even his deputy is young, but also a small and lean cabinet. Because a small and lean cabinet is going to be efficient than having a whole. You see, one of the advantages of broad-basedness in our case was that it contained the fighting factions, but it also brings in the problem of inefficiency. You bring everybody who will not deliver, but who has an agenda to deliver. And I think this small and lean cabinet is really a pointer that Kenya is on the move.
What Uganda learns is,
yes, what do we learn?
What Uganda learns is, because now have Vision 40, we are going to have 400. We are going to have 400 ministers, 2,000 MPs, and in the next 15 years we will be having 1,000 ministers and 20,000 MPs.
Will they do that job?
That is the trajectory. Because we want to get a lot of oil, so MPs will be 220,000. Ministers, 1,000.
Multiply. We have to go. Thank you very much indeed, dear guests. As many have something to say very briefly.
Yes, well, I think on top of the fact that they are trying to be frugal and minimize cost of public administration,
efficiency as well.
You also need to appreciate that they have also taken the very serious cuts in terms of salary.
Okay.
The president is going to receive 1.2 million Kenyan shillings.
That's about 30.
The governors are going to receive 640,000 shillings.
We have to go. They've slashed it.
Yes, but by their economy, I think that is a lot of frugality.
Well, of course, thank you very much.
Has been
time is up. Adiagas tonight. Honorable Lydia Onyeto, two-time Uganda reserve of the East African Parliament. Mr. Azman Basel, the president of JEMA political party. Dr. Arthur Bainomshe, head of peace and security program at Accord, and Mr. Charles Romushana, honorable former head of political intelligence at State House. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host at Manchester. So Spectrum will be back on Monday. Have a very good weekend.